Senator Bray, we're live again. It's 10:20.
Okay, you're in a slightly, well, you're east of me, so my clock's only 10:18. All right. So I think I have 10:19, so I guess we'll just wait a minute for see if other people flip on their switch.
This Zoom is tough, Mr. Chair.
Zoom is, yeah, it's
it is tough. We get people who are well versed and understand their business inside and out, and have so much to share with us, and who assume that we know more than we know, and we don't know sometimes how to ask them to slow down and start at the beginning, and it many of the cues that and verbal and facial expressions and head scratching that you do in a meeting that would communicate those things, aren't available.
right.
And you don't want to interrupt them because that's not polite, and but you don't want to be quiet because you're heading down a trail that you've been lost, or it's a whole bunch of new stuff that's not just, it takes a whole new learning or more discipline, and I'm not a disciplined person, so so
I would say we are all in the same boat on this one. It's easier and harder day by day, easier and harder both day by day as we get further, especially as we get into more complex and nuanced things that we're working on without that being in person.
No, it's 10:21.
Okay. All right. So it's Thursday, February 11th, 10:21. This is the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. We are reconvening for the second morning session, and we're continuing work on weatherization. We're shifting gears now back to dig more deeply into a question that we floated out in the last 2 weeks. And actually, we just finished the prior session with it, which is, again, I'm going to use my funnel hand signal, which is, if we're going to have, when we have monies from multiple streams flowing into a bigger, broader program for energy efficiency work, how are we going to receive them? How are we going to allocate them? And how are we going to monitor for performance? Which I figure is just good program design, period. And then on top of it, from our perspective as legislators who are going to be compelling some of these contributions in the form of rates and fees and taxes, we have a fiduciary responsibility to know that we've set up the most functional program we can that's as cost effective as possible. So with that preamble, as I've been thinking about it and talking with all of you about this in the last couple of weeks, one of the models that presents itself, I don't know if it's perfect, but it's a good stepping off point into the discussion, is that we already have Efficiency Vermont operating, and it receives monies compelled by the state in the form of the energy efficiency charge. Their budget setting goes through a process with the department, the utilities themselves, and the PUC. And then there's a monitoring for performance. So there's a similar task. And so we have in Mr. Neubauer and Mr. Poor from the department and the PUC, as well as Mr. Riley and Ms. Weston, both from Efficiency Vermont, so that we can talk about how this works and what we might learn from it, whether or not we say, we're seeking to create a similar program that runs alongside this one, or another program functionally analogous to it located entirely elsewhere. I don't think there's any determination on that yet. We're just trying to get started and figuring it out. So that's the question in front of us. How would you collect monies, allocate monies, and monitor for performance in a expanded energy efficiency, by which I mean weatherization, transportation, all the tasks we're talking about taking on. So with that, Mr. Nauer, we have you up first, and I don't know if you and Mr. Poor want to tag team this, or you're going in sequence. We're entirely open to however you would like to proceed.
Good morning. Yeah, for the record, my name is Tom Nauer. I'm the Policy Director for the Vermont Public Utility Commission. Thank you for inviting me here today. TJ and I had a couple of minutes earlier this morning to discuss how to proceed this morning, and I have a few high-level talking points that I think will serve as a good introduction to the two themes. One theme being money management, the other theme being performance oversight. And then after I make those high-level points, I think TJ had a few follow-on ideas of how maybe this could be done in the future for new or expanded programs. I'm happy to do this sequentially. I'm happy for TJ and I to be on camera and on mic at the same time. And I am happy to be interrupted, receive questions from the committee at any time while I'm here. So please do not hesitate to interrupt me, ask questions, make sure that I've explained something well, etc. So if that sounds suitable, I'll proceed.
Great, that sounds perfect. Thank you.
So again, this is a high-level overview of how money management currently works for the efficiency programs in Vermont. And I'm going to assume that the members of the committee are not interested in kind of the development of budgets and development of efficiency charge rates. But I am happy to go there if you'd like. But for what I've prepared to discuss today is, let's assume we've already set those budgets and we've already set those EEC rates. So now we've got the EEC money coming in from the utilities. That's the major funding stream for our electric efficiency work and for the natural gas efficiency work. As we've laid out in the reports that we've sent to you over the last couple of years, there's also another pot of money that the efficiency utilities have to work with for thermal and process fuel efficiency. And those monies come from the forward capacity market and the regional greenhouse gas initiative. Each energy efficiency utility acts as a fiscal agent for its own energy efficiency fund. So they're receiving money in from the EEC, they're receiving money in from the forward capacity market and from RGGI. Once they have that money in hand, they are directed to invest that money in an insured bank or credit union, or in an account where excess balances are swept into government securities on a daily basis. And the interest that's earned in that bank account or in that sweep account belongs to Vermont ratepayers. And it's the intent is it'll stay in the account and it'll be used for efficiency programs. And then the efficiency utilities have that money available to them, and they are responsible for dispersing it to payees for activities. So this could be giving out money for incentives to customers. It can be paying their contractors. It can be, they collect the little bit of money on the efficiency charge that goes to the Weatherization Trust Fund. They use some of that money to pay for the department's measurement and verification work. So they're responsible for receiving the money, investing the money, and dispersing the money. And the whole time they are directed to track and report what they're receiving and what they're dispersing using generally accepted accounting principles. The efficiency utilities are directed to provide the department and the PUC with monthly and annual financial reports. They are directed to prepare annual financial statements and to work with the commission's third-party financial auditor. Every year we have a financial audit done of the efficiency utilities, and that audit forms the basis of our annual report to the legislature on how monies were collected and dispersed. That's my high-level overview of the money management side of things. Any questions on that?
One quick question: how often and how does EVT and VGS draw funds from the utilities collecting on sort of their behalf?
So on a monthly basis, the utilities, they get paid by their customers, and the utilities then forward that money to the efficiency utilities in the form of the EEC payment. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I just didn't know if they held it for a while before forward. Okay, so it's a monthly payment off to the utilities.
Correct.
Great, thank you. All right.
And then I'll switch over to the performance oversight. And again, this is high level, and I'm happy to fill in with details as there is an appetite for this. And I invite TJ to jump in if he has any corrections, clarifications, or additions. So with respect to performance oversight, currently, we have Vermont law establishing the big picture goals and criteria, and we can look to Title 30, Sections 209 D, E, F, G. Also look at, for example, 218C or 202A. So those give the direction of where do we want to go with this. Those are the policy directions. And then lawmakers have said, all right, PUC and department, you guys go implement this and administer it. And so that's what we do. We establish performance metrics for the EEUs based on those statutory goals and criteria. That's done during the DRP proceeding. And then on an annual basis, we have the Department of Public Service. Each year they evaluate how each EEU is performing relative to those metrics that we established in the DRP proceeding. The department looks at the savings that are claimed by the EEU, verifies what was actually achieved, and provides a report to the PUC making a recommendation. For example, Burlington Electric, met all of its performance metrics for this year, or achieved 90% of them, something like that. And then the PUC has final say on verifying those annual goals. So that's on an annual basis. Every 3 years, by law, we have an independent third party that the commission hires, and that third party evaluates the savings claims and also evaluates the EEU program cost effectiveness. Then every 6 years, the PUC performs what is called an overall performance assessment. So this is a look at how each individual EEU is doing, and we attempt to answer the question of whether we would be better off if someone else was the program administrator. So I think this year in 2021, we'll be looking at Efficiency Vermont and Burlington Electric, looking at over the last couple of 3-year performance periods, how did they do? And then looking forward, do we think based on their past performance, whether they ought to continue? So that's done every 6 years. So again, we've got annual, we've got triennial, and we've got, I don't know what the word for 6 years is, but every 6 years we do a look.
Sexennial.
Great, thank you, Senator Bray.
No, I'm making that up. Sorry. That's okay.
So that's, you know, the high level performance oversight. Happy to answer questions or happy to pass the baton to TJ.
Any committee questions for Mr. Neubauer? I have one. So I hadn't sent this to you ahead of time, but maybe 209, 218, and 202 live so firmly in your head you just could think about this on the fly. Would we need, for expanding the weatherization work, as well as reaching into reducing transportation emissions, would we need to establish, would we need to do work in statute to establish policy that would then drive your work in terms of analyzing a program if we're to expand on weatherization, expand on efficiency through transportation as well? Or maybe that's something you can think about.
Right.
I haven't looked at it.
I haven't looked at that question. Off the top of my head, I'm going to say yes. Some legislative help would be, legislative direction would be helpful there. You know, we've got the Title 10, Section 581 goals that sought to have 80,000 homes weatherized by 2020. So that you know was our prior guidance.
Right.
Which worked in tandem with, you know, some of the 209, Section 209 goals for thermal efficiency. Well, you know, now that that 80,000 home goal has come and gone, and we didn't meet it. So, you know, guidance like that would be helpful moving forward. We've got the overall greenhouse gas goal, greenhouse gas reduction requirements now. So those are good goals, but, you know, I think for the department and PUC, if we were asked or directed to administer and implement programs, some legislative direction would be very helpful there.
Thank you. And obviously we'll come back to that, but, right, great. Mr. Poor.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me back again. For the record, TJ Poor, Director of Efficiency and Energy Resources at the Department of Public Service. I'll start, I think, by maybe I'll take a shot at also answering that question of yours, Senator Bray. I do think it's my understanding anyway, as the statutes are currently written, but for the work that you all did last year in Act 151, that efficiency utilities cannot use the efficiency charge for transportation efficiency measures. So, and when I say transportation efficiency in this context, I mean promoting the conversion from an internal combustion engine to an electric vehicle. I do think some statutory authority would be needed to expand their role there. The other piece where I think statutory changes might be necessary is if there were another funding stream, then the current statute in 209, it really clearly sets out a number of objectives and criteria for use of the energy efficiency charge and use of the thermal and process fuel funds from RGGI and the forward capacity market that Mr. Neubauer talked about. And so if there was another funding stream or another mechanism, then that, you know, it would either need to be wrapped into those criteria or specifically, you know, have its own set of criteria that would need to be addressed.
Thank you. That's helpful.
So I planned to zoom out a little bit on the question of money management and performance oversight. And focus my testimony today on the question of how should the state oversee an enhanced or amended ecosystem of providers or funding. And the short answer is it depends. It depends on the structure of the program type, the size, where the funding comes from. And so instead of a single answer, as I was thinking about this, I think it'd be useful to share several principles to think about as you debate oversight structures and funding sources and how all those intertwine. And many of these will come from the experience with the regulated efficiency utilities and the structure that Tom just laid out. But we've also at the department developed and managed programs and financing mechanisms like the home energy loan, which started in our office before transition to Efficiency Vermont. And we also manage lots of ARA funds. You mentioned earlier, we had the Clean Energy Development Fund that is housed in our office, but point out that it's managed by an independent board that I think the structure is dictated by statute there as well. So I think the first thought that I wanted to share is that the level of money management and oversight should be commensurate with the funding expected to be available and the type of funding available. So, there's a base level of oversight and auditing that's going to be necessary with any additional investment. But when we think about everything that Tom just explained with Efficiency Vermont and $50 million per year of investment, that's the equivalent of a very detailed rate case every few years for utilities. Those regular required check-ins and the overall performance assessment, which kind of ranges from just the 3-year performance period to financial stewardship of ratepayer funds. There's detailed governance documents. There's the verification that Tom talked about, and if we're just providing a small, relatively speaking, a small increment above what we're already doing, we don't want to recreate that entire structure and have a bureaucracy that's going to spend more money on oversight than it's actually providing value. One example of this too, this is something I've been trying to peg down over the last couple of weeks, but if we have a new loan program that the implementers like Efficiency Vermont or OEO can leverage to drive demand, well, that loan provider probably already has, and any of the existing ones has all kinds of layers of oversight already, right? They have their Department of Financial Regulation, and they have their own boards, and so that oversight mechanism may be different to evaluate the financing products that are established, but then the program implementers may still be accessing those, and we just want to make sure we're measuring and overseeing exactly what we to the performance that we want to achieve and to the goals that we want to achieve. But at the same time, the coordination of that could be helpful. So it may be a plan and a report to the Public Utility Commission. Hawaii has a green. I'm hesitate to use the word green bank because I think the bank gives wrong connotation in some instances, but it's like a green capital fund. So it's money available for financing. And it's a authority embedded in a state agency, and that authority then has to submit to their Public Utilities Commission an annual plan for review and approval, and the authority's projected operational budget for the next year, and then they have some reporting on the back end. Not saying that's necessarily right for here, but I just wanted to provide that as an example of the integration that could happen, you know, with existing implementers and financing entities without perhaps being too burdensome.
Sure. Mr. Ford, do you know what the scale of funds is? How much money that Hawaii, the Green Capital Fund?
I have that in notes, I believe. I don't have the exact amount here. I can probably get that while Efficiency Vermont is talking afterwards.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious. I mean, if it, you know, makes a difference if it's 3 million versus 30 or something like that, you know, like
right.
The kind of scale that we're.
It's a good question. I had some other examples and with dollar amounts that, but not Hawaii.
Right.
So I can get that for you though. I will follow up.
So scale the oversight to the scale of the funding mechanism.
Right.
Yeah.
The second point I wanted to make is similar to, you know, avoid duplication or unnecessary bureaucracy, but I wanted to make the point that multiple funding streams and oversight mechanisms might be appropriate. And here I want to use the example of the Office of Economic Opportunities weatherization programs. They are funded and receive their funds different than the efficiency utilities. And I'm not able to go quite into the weeds as far as Tom went with the efficiency utilities for OEO, but I think, as you know, they're funded by the tax on delivered fuels and some by the Department of Energy. Those funds go directly to the Office of Economic Opportunity. And I think that is, in this instance, you know, my opinion is that that's appropriate, and that we that program is housed in the Agency of Human Services for a reason. It's for bigger than just an energy program, and so the goals of the funding could be a little disparate, right? And I'd be hesitant to wrap in some of these disparate programs too closely, where we could have unintended consequences of, hey, these priorities ultimately say no more funding for low income weatherization.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, I'll say it again, just because this is a sensitive thing. And actually, we've talked about it quite a bit in the last couple of days, is that we know that the services provided through the OEO programs are broader than just energy efficiency work, and that we recognize the value of that. And I think actually we're coming to appreciate and understand all the more how the best program, if it isn't well delivered, you know, like through adequate time, one-on-one with the recipient, you may not get nearly as far as you would hope and deliver the you would not get as much work done as you could. So we don't want to necessarily hold them to the same metrics, like lowest cost per CO2 equivalent avoided or reduced. We know that there's a bigger story there.
Right. And I mean, I know you've been taking a lot of testimony on this, and so hopefully what I'm saying today is really reinforcing things. I don't think what I'm saying is too new in most cases. So it's great that you recognize that. And speaking of, you know, metrics like cost of carbon saved, you know, I do think that segues into the next principle that I was going to discuss, is to set clear priorities, like 209 as an example, 30 VSA 209, and let an independent board or commission balance the funding in accordance with those priorities, and with opportunities for stakeholder input. And again, that needs to be scaled to the size of the funding, but I won't go into the energy efficiency charge too much, except to say I think that repeat that there's a lot of different priorities in 30 VSA 209. On the downside of that, there's at least 8 objectives listed, with 4 given higher priority, as well as at least 15 other goals and criteria. And I think that can be a challenge. A lot of them are competing and on purpose, but I guess I'm suggesting keep it manageable, please.
Right. Yeah. It's sometimes whatever. I read through that and I go, oh, well, this is a clear articulation of our top 37 priorities.
Yeah.
Wait, there's something wrong here. Okay.
Right. And I think at another time, I'm happy to provide perspective on those priorities, but I think that's topic for another day. Just a few more here with regards to performance oversight, just ensuring that all benefits and costs are considered. I think this is also just reinforcing what you've heard, even those that are hard to quantify. Non-energy benefits, low-income weatherization, health benefits are massive, and there are health benefits for other weatherization as well that are less well quantified for the so-called market rate weatherization, but we know they're greater than 0, and we want to quantify them the best that we can.
Can I ask a quick question on the health piece there? Because Department of Health created that helpful 2-pager, that laid out energy savings and health-related savings of improvements to the family whose home was weatherized, as well as community benefits like cleaner air quality. Is there more work going on so that we have something to build on, or I'm just wondering how much more work we need to do? For instance, when you and Ken Jones did that report, you said, well, at this point, you're unable to roll that into the analysis. And I get it, that it was a sort of a snapshot report at that moment. But if you had time or resources, is that information available, or do we have to set something up in order to figure that out?
So right now, every 2 years, the commission holds a proceeding to evaluate the avoided cost of efficiency measures. And one of the pieces that are included in that under the societal cost test, so it's the benefits and cost to society, to include things like health benefits. There's a non-energy benefits adder that we have that hasn't been updated for a long time. Right now, the department and Efficiency Vermont and a number of other stakeholders are meeting regularly to pull all of the available research and see if we can update the value in the next avoided cost proceeding, which is expected to start sometime this spring. The department will submit a petition to start that proceeding. So that was a long way to say, yes, there are folks looking into this and a proceeding set up to see if we can do better.
Okay. And this is a little bit of a side question, but it's related to this one. As part of funding conversations, we've talked very briefly about, I can't remember which Carolina it is, north or south, but I think the federal money, the federal system for health, CMS, has allowed the use, I believe, of Medicaid dollars for weatherization as part of sort of a prescription for improving the health of someone with weatherize the home to address a pulmonary health issue, that kind of a thing. Or is your department talking at all with AHS about a waiver that might allow Vermont to, that would be another funding stream that would maybe appropriately flow into this overall program?
Yeah. So the answer is yes. We've been talking with AHS, the Agency of Human Services, and the Department of Health. We've had less conversations to date with DEVA, which is the Department of Vermont Health Access, I believe, which manages the Medicaid dollars. One of the struggles with that in the conversations that we have had is that there is a limited number of Medicaid dollars that are sent to the states. And yes, we may be able to use some of those for weatherization, but they're competing with other immediate needs that Medicaid dollars are going to. And that's a challenging choice. And I think it probably goes, I think the details of that, you'd be better served by asking the AHS to come in and talk about that. We are hoping to pilot an initiative this year with Department of Health where we could get a facilitator to really connect a lot of the good work that Efficiency Vermont has done on healthy homes initiatives. Those have been in partnership with Office of Economic Opportunity and the Department of Health and some providers across the state, and to really dedicate some resources to connecting those dots where we can treat weatherization as a preventative measure, both have the providers prescribe it, have insurers cover it, and it's a win-win because healthcare costs go down. They're healthy, better, more healthy outcomes, and and more homes get weatherized.
All right, great. Senator McDonald.
So I get nervous at this point because we're talking about this climate change issue as being a really big issue, and I always worry that our solution as politicians is to talk a good game and be afraid of doing too much. And I don't know how you tackle a really big issue by going and cutting up the existing pie and making the slices different, and taking from, as the witness said, from other areas to tackle a really big issue. It just seems inadequate and fails to recognize what it is you're taking on. Weatherization is a huge program that requires lots of money. And where are we going to get it? That's the question. Transportation is a huge issue that requires lots of money to bring down fossil fuels, cut energy costs, and where are we going to get it? So that's,
yes, I think,
and
well said.
my antenna goes up and goes, we're not talking about serious stuff. We're talking about incremental nibbling here and there and business as usual. And so that's, maybe I shouldn't interrupt to say that, but what am I going to do? Sit here quietly? So thank you, Mr. Chair.
I think that's fair. And to give you a sense of the scale, when I was talking about the pilot we're hoping to initiate, it's long term, to be fair, and it will be over a few years. But just a ballpark, if the healthcare industry, because it's seeing reduced costs for weatherization, can contribute 10% to the cost of weatherization, well, then we have 10% more homes weatherized. Now, that's not attacking the scale of the problem completely, but it's a step in the right direction. So your point is well taken, though, Senator McDonald.
It's not a step forward. It's not a step backwards. It seems like a sidestep.
Well, I'll throw in one other editorial bit here, and that is, if the home itself is one of the causes of the relapses for someone's asthma, poor indoor air quality, high levels of mold, for instance, and if you can, instead of spending dollars on having that person return again and again to the hospital to recover, only to return to the home that's making them ill to begin with, if you can get to the home, you can end up improving their health and saving money. So I'm not trying to rob Peter to pay Paul. It's more like, can we get to the root of the problem as opposed to treating the symptoms once the person's made ill by their home? That's all.
Okay. Well,
But your point's well taken.
how are we going to find the money to take care of the home? Okay.
Two other points, and then I'll stop talking here. To encourage innovation through technology and program design, and I think one of the things we've seen as a success with the efficiency utility model is the performance mechanism that allow implementers to have a degree of flexibility in how goals are met. So we set the goals with consideration of the legislature's priorities that have been provided, and we reward specific targets, but we avoid picking a winning technology and a winning program design, and allow the implementer to evolve with the market and respond a little more quickly. And that I think has been really successful in Vermont with our current efficiency utility model. The other piece on encouraging innovation, I think we don't want to forget about is through competition. And I think in the right circumstances, that can really work as well. I don't know that we want to encourage competition in low-income weatherization provision for the reasons we talked about before, but in the certain circumstances, it really works. Like an example I'll give is the Community Energy and Efficiency Development Fund that Green Mountain Power ran for several years. It solicited ideas and came up with some programs that made a real difference that were outside of the efficiency utility model. It pushed the envelope on street lighting upgrades. That was in partnership with Efficiency Vermont, and they established a loan fund that allowed more investments for municipalities as well. And so fostering and enabling competition can get the results at the lowest price. And then the last thing, just really quickly, Tom already touched on it, is providing for program evaluation, measurement, and verification, also commensurate with the program type and size. And that's just two. We have, I think you've said this before, Senator Bray, a fiscal responsibility to ensure the program dollars are optimized and that results are delivered. Reporting is really helpful, and I think I will stop there and take more questions if there are any.
Okay, so I'm looking around the table, the virtual table. Any questions for Mr. Poor, or back again to Mr. Nauer? All right, well, thanks for laying out some principles and filling us in. And committee, my sense is that because this, as Mr. Poor said, so intertwined with, or maybe Mr. Nauer, I don't know, that the funding that would be used and the management and performance evaluation metrics that would be deployed are intertwined. This seems to me like an appropriate thing for us to put into what we've talked a little bit about, like having some sort of working group over between sessions, so that when we return next January, we would have clear proposals on how to move it, having been given the benefit of money has arrived in this year. That means we don't need to answer those questions yet, but and I don't think we will answer those questions before crossover. So I'm thinking on funding, and then the money management and performance evaluation, those go hand in hand and could be a working group piece of our bill that's emerging. All right. So with that, we have Mr. Riley and Ms. Weston. Good morning. Thanks for joining us here. You folks live in one of these programs, so we're interested to hear from you about the whole topic.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to you and to the committee for having us. For the record, I'm Dan Riley, the Director of Public Affairs here at Efficiency Vermont, and joining me is Carol Weston, my colleague, who's the Director of Operations. We appreciate the opportunity to come back before the committee, and appreciate your ongoing dedication to the issue of weatherization. One quick housekeeping note before we get started. I know last week when we were here, I promised some recommendations to the committee from Efficiency Vermont regarding our work to ensure that Vermonters, especially lower and middle income Vermonters, have access to support and guidance for reducing their energy burden. I promise that is coming. You gave us a week. We're looking to get that back to you by the end of the day today or tomorrow. So I just wanted to say that those will be forthcoming very quickly. I think Mr. Nauer and Mr. Poor kind of gave the 30,000-foot view. Carol and I just wanted to drill down a little bit into a little bit of the nuts and bolts of our sort of oversight and performance management. And so we have just a couple of slides. I'm going to share my screen here. And again, you heard from our colleague Rebecca Foster last week about who Efficiency Vermont is, what we are. Just quick a reminder, as the statewide energy efficiency utility, the 20-year investment that Vermonters have made in efficiency has allowed us to develop statewide infrastructure to effectively deliver energy savings to Vermonters. Deep relationships with customers and partners in the energy efficiency workforce. We've gone over the numbers before, 2.6 billion in energy saved, and really that robust energy efficiency workforce that we've been able to develop. We're quite proud of that. With that, let me turn it over to my colleague, Carol Weston.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Good morning, Ms. Weston. Good morning. I don't think you've visited with us before, so thanks for coming in, and welcome to Senate Natural Resources and Energy. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. As Dan said, my name is Carol Weston. I'm the Director of Operations for Efficiency Vermont. And I'm going to walk you through, like Dan said, a few slides, a little bit more in the details. And I'm going to build upon what Mr. Nauer and Mr. Poor said, and also I'm happy to be interrupted at any time. So in my role as the operations director, I'm responsible for ensuring that Efficiency Vermont's portfolio of programs and services is optimized to meet the needs of Vermonters and deliver benefits within budget, providing that stewardship of ratepayer dollars, as we heard from Mr. Poor. So in the next few slides, I'm going to just talk a little bit about how the regulatory process translates to budgets, to effective program delivery and performance management. But on this slide, I've just highlighted some kind of key thoughts that I'd like to leave you with today. First of all, that the regulatory process really does help focus the investment Vermonters are making in efficiency and prioritize benefits to Vermonters. The evaluation of our work ensures a balanced and cost-effective portfolio of programs, which we heard from Mr. Poor as well. Once the budgets are approved, our focus really turns to implementing programs that are statewide, that serve customers, support the workforce, and meet the goals. And then lastly, if budgets do increase, administrative costs do not increase at that same rate, meaning that we're able to leverage the foundation that we've built over the past 2 decades with our partners in order to pivot or do additional work when necessary. And Dan, if you want to advance the slides, thank you. So on this slide, you'll see a very simple graphic kind of outlining some of the key activities that make up the regulatory process. And the process really creates a framework within which Efficiency Vermont and its regulators can work together to ensure resources are maximized in a way that prioritizes the benefits to Vermonters. And as Mr. Poor said, the benefits are broad and wide ranging. There's a number of different benefits we want to achieve. Our benefits are represented by our quantitative performance indicators, our QPIs, which are our goals. And to me, the steps listed here create an effective system for communication and performance management. So our 3-year budget and goals, as Mr. Nauer described, are set in the Demand Resources Plan proceeding. And that process includes stakeholder management, potential analysis, modeling, forecasting, and budget setting, as well as goal setting.
You heard already that the budgets are updated annually through the triennial plan updates, which is where we present our program goals and budgets. We talk about significant changes from previous years, and where things such as like revenue changes to the thermal budget might be represented in modified TEPF budget. So we have that ongoing conversation. And then lastly, adaptability is baked into the process. When there are program changes or new programs that happen off cycle in response to perhaps legislation such as Act 62 or changing events like, the COVID pandemic, there's a process to have those quickly vetted and considered for approval by the department and the PUC. Next slide, Dan. Thanks. So just diving a little bit deeper into the discussion of creating a balanced portfolio of programs and services, and this really adds on to what Mr. Poor said. With numerous, QPIs and minimum performance requirements, Efficiency Vermont's really challenged to achieve multiple targets across sectors, across customer markets, across the state. And the result is a broad and diverse portfolio of programs and services that aims to achieve market transformation in key technologies while providing access to all Vermonters. So the bullets here really represent a couple of examples in the way that we approach balancing the portfolio and how our outcomes are evaluated, which I thought might be helpful. So, with efficiency measures that are proven, have proven savings and proven customer benefits, our goal is really to make those widely available within the state through easy to access programs and services. And so that's really that large scale transformation, that scaling up of things that we know can work. As newer technologies come into the market, just are made available, our strategy here is really to approach incentives in a way that provide compelling customer economics to get people to start to adopt those technologies so that we can evaluate them and determine whether those are also ready for scale and that they would also provide benefit. And so kind of wrapping around all of these things is this rigorous annual evaluation and savings verification process, which does ensure that benefits are real and durable and persist over time.
Ms. Weston, I have a quick question. So,
sure.
My understanding is that Efficiency Vermont, for instance, helps create a channel. I'm forgetting the term of art, but for instance, when heat pumps were first arriving on the scene, that Efficiency Vermont did things like a buyback offer for any unsold cold climate heat pumps that were at distributors in order to make sure distributors weren't reluctant to stock them because they might, quote unquote, get stuck with them. So can you say a little how, it sounds as though you don't have to pass all your money through direct to immediate customer savings or benefits. You can also almost act like an R&D shop a little bit to help figure out what emerging technologies are going to look like and how we would do them. Can you just say a little more about how you are able to not be so focused on delivering a benefit to a particular customer that you also have the bandwidth to do this market transformation work?
Sure. Yeah. So, newer technologies are always coming along. And the example you provided of heat pump technology is a really good one to think about. When heat pumps first came on the market and first started showing up in Vermont, they weren't the most efficient, high efficient heat pumps. And so although they were being adopted, they weren't providing the efficiency that really was going to benefit people that were using them. And so this is a good example to talk about. The way that we approach that is typically to work with, at the very beginning, manufacturers, manufacturer representatives, and our supply chain to really understand what technology is out there, really get into the details of the technology. We have an engineering team who's able to understand specifications and how technology performs to see if it's applied in Vermont, in specific ways or at scale, how will it benefit Vermonters, and what would be our role as the EEU in incentivizing the adoption of that technology? So oftentimes we start upstream with those manufacturers reps, and midstream through our local distributors, and really encourage them to if they don't already, to understand the new technology, to try it out, work with the contractors that they work with or some of their larger customers and seeing like, yeah, what happens if we install it here? We might be involved as the EEU in measuring the results of a pilot installation and learning a little bit from that. And we might pay for that pilot, as you described, to really gather that information and get to that innovation space that Mr. Poor talked about. Once we're able to see some value in that technology, we start to move it downstream a little bit. And that might be in terms of incentivizing it to customers, engaging the contractor network, having installers really understand a technology is going to make it easier for customers to adopt it, because customers lean on their contractor. That makes sense. They're asking them for their opinion. So Efficiency Vermont facilitates the conversations that really get that action moving.
Thank you.
You're welcome. On this slide, I'm showing some specifics on our thermal efficiency and process fuels budget and goals, just as an example. So we already talked about there's multiple funders. There's the EEC and the thermal efficiency and process fuels budget. So this is an example of our budget and goals for the next performance period, beginning January 1st of this year and ending December 31st in 2023. So you'll see in the green there, the budget of $21 million. And then the table below really just it shows what the QPIs are for this portfolio over the next 3-year period. It gets a little bit to what Mr. Poor was talking about in terms of having multiple targets to try to reach. And as I look at this, I see a few things that I would need to do, right, in order to successfully implement. I need to achieve overall annual savings on the order of 340,000 MMBTU per year. So how can the whole portfolio perform to achieve those goals? And then diving down into QPI number 2, we start talking about the comprehensiveness of weatherization projects. And the 3 sub QPIs that you see here are components of what would indicate a comprehensive weatherization project. And Efficiency Vermont and its regulators agree that these are good indicators of a way to measure the comprehensive nature of a program. And so as I look at that, I say, okay, in addition to the annual savings, we also need to get, some comprehensiveness baked into our weatherization program. The third QPI, housing units weatherized, which is new for us in this performance period, signals to me that we're looking to do this at scale. We would like to complete 4,400 jobs over the course of the performance period. So thinking about how we balance comprehensiveness with scaling. And then lastly, one more new QPI, greenhouse gas reductions, measured in metric tons of CO2e avoided. This is really associated with the greenhouse gas emissions that are associated with thermal energy projects. So we want to make sure we're also focusing on those greenhouse gas savings. So this is just a little microcosm of how we're kind of balancing different QPIs to achieve the overall goals of the program.
Can you say QPI 3 there, that 4,400 units over a 3-year period, how would that have compared to the prior 3-year period? Do you know approximately?
I know that in 2020, we completed about 1,200 or 1,300 projects. And in 2019, it was about 850. So let's say 2,000 over those first 2 years. I'm guessing it was probably around 700 or 800. So let's say 27 or 2,800 over the last performance period.
Thank you.
Yes. And we can move on, Dan. This is a slide that you've discussed and seen a few times, but I'll just remind everyone here, weatherization funding is projected to decline. The sources that have been serving Vermonters' thermal efficiency needs aren't sufficient to meet our goals. They are projected to decline sharply in the coming years due to the decline in projected revenue from the forward capacity market. And really, this just makes it all the more important to be strategic with whatever funds that we have and make sure that they're invested in the best way we can. Next slide, Dan.
Mr. Chair?
Senator McDonald.
It's expected to decline as shown in the graph. And is that because the cost of the efficiencies would be more than the cost of buying the electricity?
the value of the capacity payments sort of fluctuate from year to year in the forward capacity market.
Okay.
Because there's an increase of resources that can bid into the market, prices are projected to fall.
My error.
Yeah.
Apologize, witness. I was thinking about the charge as opposed to the capacity market. My error. Thank you.
Understood. Thanks. Next slide, I want to just give you a few details about implementing statewide programs. So once the budgets are set, we start working on implementation, and I provided a few bullets here just to give you some ideas of what it looks like. So, program design and implementation is where we begin. That's where we talk about how we can bring a program to a customer, how we wrap a technology in a service and a program and deliver it to the market in a way that makes them aware and want to take advantage of it. There are over 50 programs active currently in the Efficiency Vermont portfolio, and partnerships are very important throughout this stage of design and implementation. And we work very closely with the partners I've listed here, as well as others, BGS, BED, weatherization agencies, 3E, the distribution utilities, and more, to really make sure that our designs and our programs are integrated and that they make sense. So really, I think it does get a little bit to what we're talking about today in terms of how large groups of organizations might need to work together to scale things up. We move to outreach and education. So working with our partners again, educating Vermonters about the benefits of energy efficiency of a particular technology or program. And I've provided a little bit of information on, the number of visitors to our website in 2020 and the number of newsletters that we have sent out, just to highlight the fact that, there's a fair amount of engagement here. And we want to make sure we're leveraging that to get information out to our customers. Customer support is also a very big part, and I know that this committee has talked a lot about customers and how they're experiencing, these programs and how they're helped. So just to give you some information about our call center, we take calls and emails from customers, connecting them to resources. We talk through their efficiency or energy needs and questions. We provide them with the way to contact a contractor, a way to find out more about our technology, perhaps a technical resource in-house, or a resource outside of our organization that might help them with something that they're really interested in doing. And so, over 31,000 customers contacted us in 2020, and there's quite a bit of contact that happens there. Once a customer sort of enters in the funnel of creating and finalizing and going through with a project, there's a lot of back house work that happens there. Processing those projects, recording, tracking them, being able to report them to our regulators. In 2020, about 9,500 projects were processed across all of our funders. And then lastly, as we heard from Mr. Poor and Mr. Nauer, the evaluation, measurement, and verification process really looks holistically at our programs over the course of each year, analyzes the energy savings to ensure the performance is there, that the savings we've estimated are actually the savings that are happening out in the real world with our customer improvement projects. And our realization rate over the past 3 years, I put here on the slide, between 96.4 and 101.5%, meaning that, the amount of savings that we estimated achieving with the projects range between 96.4 and 101.5 of the actual savings that came out of the evaluation.
And Carol, I just would add on the outreach bullet, in terms of thinking about the website, that part is pretty critical when it comes to this weatherization work. You've heard from other witnesses over the last couple of weeks, the challenge of outreach when it comes to getting people to undertake a weatherization project. And at Efficiency Vermont, that find a contractor tool that we have is really critical. Having a list of vetted in-network contractors, especially in that moderate income space, when you can convince people to do the project, having them be able to come to our website, type in their town, and immediately get connected with a vetted contractor is really, really critical in this work.
Good point, Dan. If you want to advance to the next slide, we will talk a little bit more about our workforce development work as well. So we've talked about what goes into the programs, but I also wanted to focus in on a key part of our program implementation, which is determining what workforce would be needed for the volume of projects that we anticipate, how to support the workforce, and how to connect customers with contractors to complete the work that they need. So the Efficiency Excellence Network, the EEN, has worked to strengthen the efficiency workforce by offering training and recruiting to contractors, providing technical and sales training and mentorship to them on an ongoing basis, coordinating with trade groups and other EEUs to leverage resources for Vermont, and providing networking opportunities to them. The network began in 2013. We currently have over 400 members. And they include weatherization contractors, electricians, distributors, HVAC, and more. And really, the goal here is that we want to offer support to them in exchange for them maintaining necessary certifications that help us to be sure that they're doing these projects correctly, that they're providing a good and reliable installation to our customers. So our members will have a listing on the Efficiency Vermont website, as Dan said, so that customers can easily search for a contractor and look at reviews and things of that sort. I also want to note that, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, on the
no problem.
EEN folks, do you do periodic field visits to verify the, sort of, I don't know, the completeness of the work and make sure it's as described and all the rest?
Yeah, it depends on the program. So certainly we have QA baked into all of our programs, and some of them might include a call to a customer. Some of them might include monitoring or metering of an installation of a piece of equipment. Some of them might include going on site and being there when the work is being done or walking through afterwards. So it's a combination of a lot of different ways that we do that.
Thanks.
Talking just for a minute about our trainings, we consistently offer trainings to our members to share updates, provide overviews of new technology or new techniques, and keep everyone informed on the same page for our programs. In 2020, we saw a need for expanding trainings while contractors were unable to get out into the field. We completed 56 trainings in 2020 with a total of 558 attendees, and we switched to an online virtual training platform as required, by the COVID shutdown in early March. And we are looking forward to getting back to trainings in person, but we're finding good uptake, including on the healthy homes training work. Weatherization contractors have been taking advantage of that, as Mr. Poor described, in understanding what a healthy home and weatherization have in common, and being able to provide visits and consultations to customers on that. And so one last thing, and this is my last slide. In addition to these standard trainings in 2019 and early 2020, Efficiency Vermont used its one-time funds from Act 62 to launch trainings to help certify contractors who wanted to get into the weatherization workforce through the Building Performance Institute's certification. And really understanding that by infusing the weatherization program with more funds, we wanted to support the network and make sure that there was more contractors available to do the work. We had 44 participants in our trainings. Since it can be difficult to take time off for work to do trainings, we've provided a stipend for attendance and compensated attendees when they completed the training with a bonus. Efficiency Vermont staff was involved in the design and led those trainings. We have BPI certified staff on our payroll as well. And since the trainings are hands-on to prepare workers to be in homes, we had to pause them early in 2020, but we do hope to resume them when it's safe to do that. And then lastly, I'd really just want to highlight our partnership with NeighborWorks of Western Vermont. So Efficiency Vermont has long been partnered with NeighborWorks for many years. NeighborWorks has had a large impact in the weatherization space, and specifically that low and moderate income Vermonters working through weatherization. So in 2019 and 2020, Efficiency Vermont used its Act 62 funds to enter into a new agreement with NeighborWorks where they would act as a general contractor in parts of the state that had limited weatherization contractors. We wanted to make sure not only are we building up the network of contractors, but that they're available statewide. And so by having NeighborWorks act as that general contractor and placing, matching customers and contractors in certain areas together, we were able to make sure that customers could access contractors and get assured that they are getting same levels of service and energy savings from their projects. And that is all of the formal information I have, and I'm happy to take questions as well.
Thank you. So I'm looking to see if there are any questions. I don't see any hands yet. So on that last slide is also a big topic of conversation. I'm just wondering if we didn't ask you to prepare on this question, but do you have any thoughts you can share about the practicality of, having a goal of doubling and doubling again over the next, well, who knows exactly how steep that climb is, but let's just say doubling and doubling again in the next 6 to 8 years, the rate at which we're weatherizing, that is a significant growth in workforce. So what's your advice to the committee of things to keep in mind, and how would we support that in the workplace?
Mm-hmm.
You've heard from multiple witnesses over the last several weeks, just about the importance of growing that workforce. And I think we highlighted the BPI program as an effective blueprint in terms of we know it's a popular program that we were able to get results. And I think being able to do more of those type, if not that exact program, would certainly help grow that workforce. Carol, I don't know if you have other specifics.
Yeah, I would say, weatherization, there's a lot to a weatherization project, and there's a lot to do to make sure that it's done correctly. And so having a workforce that's trained and understands, what happens when you put insulation and air seal a home is really important. And so I do believe that workforce development is going to be a key component to scaling. We experienced a large growth of jobs in 2020 as a result of the Act 62 funds. We did, I think, 4 times the number of projects in the fall of 2020 than we normally had. And we found that the workforce was able to flex to meet that through some of the growth that we see here in the trainings. And I think we would need more of that for sure. And we would want to make sure that that focus on health and safety and outcomes in terms of which measures are the right ones to do in a home really make the difference in a weatherization project. So to me, that's key. And I would say for sure, resources on training, growing the workforce, connecting people to contractors is all a part of that.
Okay. And when you say flex, does that mean, for instance, folks who might be in the builders and remodelers world took on increasing work in weatherization, trained up, and then took that work on? Is that how you flex? That's what flex means here?
Yeah, we saw a few different things. We saw some of the home performance contractors add to their workforce by hiring new folks and getting them trained up. We saw that some of the non-BPI certified insulation contractors that were out in the field also got certified to become, able to do home performance work. So not everyone does specific, BPI certified work, but there are some trades that are fairly close to that could, work it in. We also think working with Vermont Technical College, with, technical centers around the state in providing weatherization as a trade, as a training to help build that workforce is really helpful. So, and the other thing, I think that contractors did, frankly, is they worked really hard to meet customers' needs and get out there for folks. And so, you can't imagine that they're going to be able to do that full time for the next 10 years while we scale weatherization. They always are, busy, but I think they were super busy this year. So we want to make sure the workforce can handle it. But I think bringing others in is a key component. Yeah.
Right. Thanks for your patience, Senator Westman. I have one quick one while we're still talking about this, and that is you mentioned technical centers. That's been on our radar. Can you say something about how what kind of connection already exists with technical centers? Is this something where we could do more, or it's already fully functional and don't count on that as another way of finding new workers to enter the workforce?
I would say that it's an area we want to grow. I think there have been some successful connections that Efficiency Vermont has made with some of the technical centers across the state. We haven't seen a large outcome there, but I would say that if that became a priority to scale up the weatherization workforce quickly, we would absolutely want to think about a curriculum and an apprentice program perhaps, or some other way to recruit interested individuals into this work. And to me, technical centers are a great way to get started. They're also diverse in their location across the state. And so there's a way potentially to get that geographic equity of contractors involved. So I would say the bones of what needed are probably understood, but more effort to scale that up and have it be truly successful.
Right. Thank you. Senator Westman.
So what I roughly hear in that is there's somewhere in the range of north of 400 people doing the work in all of this. What I don't get a sense of is in the training and what the budget looks like to do that now. What are the number of people to produce the end product that you would need? And what does a timeline over the next 10 years look like of what you would need in personnel to do that? Mm-hmm. There's going to be rollover with training. So what am I looking at? If and this comes from when I sit on an appropriations committee, and if you had a state agency doing this, I would have the personnel tied to the function that was being done, and we would look at out years to be able to do all that. And I hear what you need, and I see what the growth is in it, and I know it'll take more. And I get a feel now for what you do for training, but I don't have a clear view of what that budget would look like and how what the number of people that you're talking about is.
Sure. So the 400, the number 400 is the total contractors within the Efficiency Excellence Network. The actual weatherization trade group is about 50. Potentially slightly more at this point, but it's in the range of 50 or so. And so, if you are scaling up by a budget of 10 or 20, do you have to scale the workforce by 10 or 20? I don't think it's quite that. I don't think it's quite a one-to-one, but it's certainly going to be bigger. And one thing I would say is that weatherization contractors very appropriately, right, want to make sure that if they're going to build their workforce, that there's a continuous supply of work for them. And I think that would be having stable funding is an indication to the market that there's work for them in the future. And so I would say that if that were to be the case, we would find that the market would respond. We would see more individuals willing to be trained and get ready to do weatherization jobs at scale. In terms of the budget, Efficiency Vermont is not the only player in the space. We do dedicate a portion of the weatherization budget to this work. I would say, I don't have the exact number on hand right now. We've estimated that potentially 20 to 30% of the time that we spend managing the program is spent with our workforce, and that we've got a budget that also supports the trainings and things of that sort. And we did spend some of the Act 62 money on additional workforce work. So with a budget in front of us, we could certainly get back to you on what it would take, what we think an estimate would be in terms of growing the workforce, if that would be helpful.
It would be helpful to know, what are you spending now?
Mm-hmm.
How many people are you training now? Do you have to go back and retrain the 50 people? Probably not. But to grow that, what would this all look like in a plan for over the next 5 years and what we're looking at?
We're happy to get back to the committee with detailed numbers for all of that, Senator.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if I've got to do blank number of houses, what's the workforce?
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Good to have someone with a appropriations planning mindset in the committee helping us with our questions.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may, it sounds like a good part of this work will be done down the hall, if you will, right? I mean, that's really, I mean, we're talking about matching it up with our colleagues in appropriations.
Well, I would say that that's true, but I would say that if we're going to set policy and we're going to figure out a budget, I want to make policy recommendations to the committee down the hall that we can put together a budget with and we can support.
Which committee down the hall?
It's going to end up in appropriations, I suspect.
Well, it's going to be dead there. There's no money for it.
Well, okay, so there's two things going on. There's one, there's the bill and looking forward, right? And then two, the other thing in play is the governor's recommend already includes $25 million. So as part of our bill, there's the opportunity to shape how we use that money as a committee to make recommendations to appropriations to support the bill that we're shaping up right now. So I'm not assuming that that I don't think either this committee nor Approps wants to assume that the governor's recommend on energy spending is that's done and we're just going to watch how that plays out. I think we're happy to have money in play, and we should consider how we would recommend spending it most cost effectively. And I want this, my goal is to have this committee put Senator Westman in the best possible position when he's presenting on behalf of this committee when he's wearing his appropriations hat. And I mean, we routinely write a letter to Approps, and I would usually go in and talk, but we're going to have a deeper, more complex conversation and bigger budget to look at with Approps this year. So I actually think there's work to do, but it's a very promising position.
There is money within that 25 to do workforce training for this, and I'm just trying to figure out what's a right number.
Right. Senator McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I raised my hand to speak before you spoke, and you've said pretty much everything I was going to say. So I guess I'm just going to reinforce that. We do write a Dear Jane letter every year. And having served on appropriations, I know that the Dear Jane letters, the committees don't necessarily get every penny they ask for, but the committee does take those letters seriously. And actual numbers change because of them. So we should advocate strongly to put power in Senator Westman's arm on the committee.
Okay. All right.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to ask, when is that, what's the timing of that letter?
We haven't had usually it would be coming later because we just have the big bill. However, as we just heard in caucus, and I was talking to Senator Westman about this morning, we're actually talking about two bills, right? Like a smaller interim bill and then a final budget. So the question is, to what degree do we need to get schedules for both? And it could be that we're not shipping just one budget request, but some of these things might be faster tracked than others. Workforce could be a piece of that, or more work on, through the OEOs could be, who knows what pieces we should identify. But I think we'll get that squared away. The conversation really just got started in the last 24 hours. So thank you.
Thank you.
And just so the committee knows, I reached out to Senator Ballant and Chair Kitchell this morning about exactly this to help us stay in sync with the other committees. All right, so if there are no further questions for Mr. Nauer, Mr. Poor, Ms. Weston, or Mr. Riley, I'd like to thank them for coming in and helping us work on this morning. And committee, if we could stay for another few minutes, I'm mindful of the time. I want to make sure we have a break, get out before noon, well before noon. But I did want to follow up on a planning conversation I had with Senator Westman this morning in terms of shaping the bill that we're going to be basically writing as a committee. So Senator Westman, do you want to share some of your thoughts that we were talking about
Thank
this
you all.
morning?
Take care.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks very much.
I basically called Chris to say that the Appropriations Committee is talking about breaking out some of the stuff that they think needs to move faster. And, one of the things that was raised by the chair of appropriations was that we move weatherization quicker, and we move the 25 million that the governor has out there quicker because it will take time to train people to do the work for this. So we might want to move that quicker. I expressed to her that our committee had been talking about the pieces of all of that 25 million. The financing piece, we had different groups in, including Neil Lunderville and groups, and that's 16 million of the 25. There's what, 4.5 for the community action agencies, and the 16 has, I think, is broken down and has a piece for training for people to do weatherization. But I'm not sure that I couldn't tell you where this committee would want to come down on all of those pieces yet, and whether we consider that the right emphasis that the governor put forward. And I'd like this committee to be able to weigh in on that 25 million and say, we think it's is correct.
Right. Yeah, thanks. And the other piece we heard about only very briefly is the 5 million to the State Energy Management Program, the SEMP. So could be a great idea, but I don't know how that compares to last year's budget. Is that, $1 million more or 5 times what they had? I think it's actually a substantial jump. I think they were closer to 1 million before. Anyway, so it'd be good for us to be better informed on that piece too. And I don't know who's delivering all the weatherization training, to what degree it happens at the community action agencies, to what degree the OEO, the state OEO office lines that up, or if they basically passing money through to the community action agencies like Capstone, and to what degree they pass money through to someone like Efficiency Vermont to do outreach and training.
Where's it, when it gets passed through, where's it coming from?
Well, so like the weatherization assistance money, which has been around $11 million a year, mostly.
There's this discussion of the governor has 25 million bucks. Where's that coming from? What's the source?
Oh, well, okay. So I know this is not, I'll just say it the way people say it. That's from the current quote unquote surplus, which I believe is based on, Senator Westman can describe it better than I can, why we have this extra money.
I think Mark raises a good question. I think because that we ought to get somebody from Joint Fiscal in to say on a sheet, here's the dollar, that 16, they're supposed to be able to put it out with the loaning institutions, and they're going to bond some, and they're going to turn that into 35. I think we ought to see on a piece of paper what this all looks like and what the pieces are and what the product at the end of it is all supposed to be. And we should say, we like it or we don't, or we like pieces of it and change pieces of it. But I think that's what this committee ought to do.
Right. Can you work with Stephanie, for instance, on that, Senator Westman?
When I get off from here, I have joint fiscal at lunch, and then I got appropriations right after that. But right after that, I plan on asking Stephanie if she put together a sheet. I think the state dollars in this, Mark, are all surplus. But
I don't understand what surplus is when we talk about the time of limited resources.
Well, it's one-time surplus money
From where?
from the increase in revenue estimates that we just received in January.
Like sales tax revenues and income taxes and general fund revenues?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why I think we ought to be able to answer those questions, and I think joint fiscal can create a picture for us.
Right. Well, that would be great, because usually, what we're doing when it comes to budget recommendations is it's more often been, adjusting a pre-existing A&R budget or something like that, or is there enough money for the environmental cleanup fund or some those kinds of things. The only time we've really argued and tried to get to find revenues and expenditures was the the clean water bill, where we had to identify funding and set up a program. So it to me feels like another similar lift where it's time for us to get into the weeds on the money and to help stand up a long-term program.
We're also talking about bonding here, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
just on bonding, and we bonded a whole bunch of money for housing here a couple of years ago, right? And all that has to be paid back, which is paid back by general fund, right?
Yep.
Or does the estate have the legal ability to go out and bond, to pay that bond off, to rebond it and pay it off at the current interest rates?
I think one of the questions we should ask Stephanie and joint fiscal is, can you create a picture of what this would bond and what would the payments look like going forward?
Every time we bond for something, we carve into the general fund obligations that future legislatures have to deal with.
Yep.
Is there any opportunity to, this is getting out of natural resources, but I don't know where to ask the question.
Right. Well,
the bond that we picked for housing, if you could refinance the way your people are being encouraged to refinance their homes at lower interest rates, could you rebond and pay all those bonds off and have a bond that you had lower payments on it?
That's above my head.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah. But
okay. It's
right.
But we
exploding my head. Okay.
Yeah, I think we ought to at least have a picture of all of this as we're.
Yes.
Sure. I agreed. And one thing is, having talked to Treasurer Pierce during the fall as part of preparing for this work we're doing now, because the full faith and credit of the state is already committed to other bonds, or generally represented as already being fully committed, lots more demand than ability to fund. Part of the reason for the VHFA discussion is because a bond through them does not fall on the state's books. So it's a way of.
But what they are is private activity bonds, and we do have a limit on how many private activity bonds we could do. So the question would be, what are you cutting out in the private activity bonds that you're not going to do this?
Right. Okay. Yet another good question. Is that also a JFO question?
Well, yeah, I think they could answer that and create the picture. The private activity bonds are divided up by the emergency board.
Okay. Well, all right. So thank you. More to learn. And this, so great. I'm feeling like there's long and short-term things. There's what we're going to try to do in affecting this year's appropriations. And then there's, to get to the scale of funding for the long haul, there's all these deeper questions on bonding, on bill financing, plain old making appropriations, and thermal energy benefit charge, perhaps, possibly adjusting the fuel taxes. So we have work to do, but thank you, Senator Westman, for helping us get better prepared to work with appropriations.
Senator Westman, well, we have Senator Westman here in the witness chair. I'm wondering.
I'm ducking out. I have joint fiscal in
Well,
4 minutes.
one final question.
I'm hungry.
I believe it's who is overseeing the education budget? Usually, I believe it was Senator McCormick for a number of years. Was sort of the our point
Yeah,
person.
I think the higher ed budget is Senator Baruth.
It was
Okay.
divided up. Higher education was one thing, and then I did the agency of education.
Right.
Hold it. Senator Campion, are you asking questions that are relevant to this committee?
Yes, he is.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
you.
So tomorrow is it's Friday, and we're going to have a 9 o'clock start, not 8:30. Felt like
We just getting warmed up.
That's nice.
A little extra.
I like
breather.
it. Mr. Chairman, before we adjourn, the fairs, the various county fairs have asked if they could speak to natural resources and energy. We're the Energy Committee. They're unhappy with how they're billed for electricity. I am not advocating for their position, simply that they would like to be heard from. I think I think they don't understand that with electricity, you pay for the generating capacity you're demanding rather than what you actually use. But they're in a unique situation, which is they use a lot of electricity for 5 days a year, and then are paying at that rate to keep the lights on the rest of the year. I'd like to at least hear from them if we can do that.
Okay, sure. Could you forward
tell them.
an email and/or name to Jude and me, and then we'll
Yes.
know who to call on?
Yes, I'll do that.